Han Ji-woo rolled up her sleeve and watched as the nurse drew 3 vials of blood from her arm. It was a normal Tuesday morning at the genomics laboratory where she worked. Every employee had to participate in the genetic mapping project. It was company policy, nothing special. She worked as a medical researcher in Seoul, studying human DNA patterns for disease prevention. The job was interesting but routine. Wake up, go to the lab, analyze samples, go home. Her life followed a predictable rhythm, and she liked it that way. 3 days later, everything changed. Dr. Park Min-ho burst into her office without knocking. His face was pale, and his hands shook as he held a tablet. Ji-woo had never seen her mentor look so disturbed in the 5 years she had worked under him. "We need to talk," he said, closing the door behind him. "About your blood test." Ji-woo set down her coffee. "Is something wrong? Do I have a genetic disorder?" "I don't know what you have," Dr. Park admitted. He placed the tablet on her desk, showing a complex genetic sequence. "This appeared in your DNA. It doesn't match anything in our database. It doesn't match any known human pattern." Ji-woo leaned forward, studying the screen. The sequence was strange, consisting of base pairs that seemed to follow a different organizational structure. "That's impossible. Maybe the equipment malfunctioned?" "We ran it 4 times on different machines," Dr. Park said. "Kim Soo-min verified the results personally. This sequence exists in your blood, Ji-woo, and according to our analysis, it's ancient, older than modern humans, older than any hominid species we know." A chill ran down Ji-woo's spine. "How old?" "Our best estimate? 500 million years, give or take." Ji-woo laughed nervously. "That's ridiculous. That predates almost all complex life on Earth. There must be contamination in the sample." "That's what we thought too," Kim Soo-min said, entering the office. Her colleague looked just as shaken as Dr. Park. "But we tested your other samples from previous health checks. The sequence is in all of them. It's part of you, Ji-woo. It's always been there." The 3 researchers spent the next hour discussing possibilities: contamination, equipment failure, database errors. But none of their explanations made sense. The sequence was real, and it existed only in Ji-woo's DNA. That night, Ji-woo couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about the test results. What could it mean? Was she sick? Was she even fully human? The questions spun in her mind like a broken record. The next morning, she noticed a black car parked across from her apartment building. It stayed there all day. When she left for work, it followed her at a distance. She told herself she was being paranoid, but her hands gripped the steering wheel tighter than usual. At the lab, Dr. Park pulled her aside again. "Someone accessed our servers last night. They broke through our security and downloaded files." "What files?" Ji-woo asked, though she already knew the answer. "Yours. Only yours. They took your complete genetic profile and all the analysis data." Kim Soo-min suggested they contact the police, but Dr. Park shook his head. "And tell them what? That someone stole genetic data we can't explain? Data that suggests impossible things?" That evening, Ji-woo returned to her apartment to find her door slightly ajar. Her heart hammered in her chest as she pushed it open. Everything looked normal at first glance. Nothing was missing. Her television, laptop, and jewelry all remained in place. But someone had been there. She could feel it. Small things were wrong. A book moved slightly. A drawer not quite closed. Someone had searched her home carefully looking for something. She called the police. They took a report but found no signs of forced entry. The officer suggested she had forgotten to lock her door properly. Ji-woo didn't argue, but she knew better. The black car appeared again the next day, and the day after that. 1 week after her blood test, the world stopped spinning. It happened at night. Ji-woo was working late at the lab when Kim Soo-min called her to the window. "You need to see this." Above Seoul, hanging in the sky like a black jewel, was a ship. Not an airplane or helicopter. A vessel unlike anything humanity had ever built. Its surface seemed to absorb light, making it appear as a dark void against the stars. It was massive, easily the size of several city blocks. Every phone in the building buzzed simultaneously. News alerts flooded in. The ship wasn't just over Seoul. 12 identical vessels had appeared over major cities across the globe: New York, London, Beijing, Tokyo, Moscow. They all hung there, silent and waiting. The world held its breath. Governments scrambled. Military forces mobilized. The internet exploded with theories, panic, and wonder. First contact. Humanity was not alone in the universe. 2 days later, the aliens made their announcement. They called themselves the Velran Accord. They came in peace. They wished to establish diplomatic relations with Earth's leaders. The world watched as sleek figures in elegant armor appeared at the United Nations, speaking perfect English and offering technology and friendship. But privately, they sent a different message. Jiwoo learned this when 3 Velran arrived at her laboratory. They wore no weapons, but their presence filled the room with an otherworldly authority. The lead figure was tall and graceful, with silver skin and eyes like liquid mercury. "I am Ambassador Thalen of the Velran Accord," he said in flawless Korean. His gaze swept across the room, passing over Dr. Park, Kim Soo-min, and 24 other researchers. Then his eyes locked onto Jiwoo. Everything seemed to stop. Ambassador Thalen stepped forward. His companions followed. The 3 aliens moved through the room until they stood directly before Jiwoo. Then, to her complete shock, Ambassador Thalen lowered himself to one knee. His companions did the same. "At last," he said, his voice filled with something like reverence. "The heir has awakened. We have searched for 500 years across 1,000 worlds. The bloodline continues. The throne has called and you have answered." Jiwoo's mouth opened, but no words came out. Everyone in the lab stared at her. Dr. Park looked completely lost. Kim Soo-min grabbed her arm for support. "I think you have the wrong person," Jiwoo finally managed to say. "No," Ambassador Thalen said, rising to his feet. "You carry the marker gene. We detected it the moment we entered Earth's orbit. You are the only one on this entire planet who possesses it. You are the successor of the oldest throne, heir to the progenitor empire." "I'm a medical researcher," Jiwoo said weakly. "I work in a lab. I eat instant noodles for dinner. I'm nobody special." Ambassador Thalen smiled. It was a gentle expression, almost sad. "You are the most important being in the galaxy, Han Jiwoo. And your life as you knew it has ended. The real one begins now." Outside, more Velran ships appeared in the sky. The black car across the street suddenly made sense. They hadn't been watching her with hostility. They had been protecting her. Jiwoo looked at Kim Soo-min, at Dr. Park, at the familiar walls of the laboratory where she had spent years of her life. Everything felt different now. The world had expanded beyond her comprehension in a matter of seconds. "What throne?" she whispered. "What empire?" "Come with us," Ambassador Thalen said, "and we will show you your inheritance. We will show you what you truly are." Jiwoo refused to leave the lab. She demanded answers, evidence, and scientific proof. The idea that she was heir to some alien empire sounded like something from a bad movie. Ambassador Thalen seemed to expect her resistance. He simply nodded and asked his companions to bring their equipment. What followed was the strangest science lesson of Jiwoo's life. The Velran set up holographic displays throughout the laboratory. 3-dimensional images floated in the air, showing genetic codes, historical records, and star maps. Dr. Park and Kim Soo-min watched in silent amazement as Ambassador Thalen began his explanation. 500 million years ago, the progenitors ruled the galaxy, he said. Images showed vast cities of crystalline light, spanning entire worlds. They were the first intelligent species to achieve space travel. They built an empire of 10,000 worlds. They were scientists, philosophers, and artists. They were remarkable beings. What happened to them? Jiwoo asked, her scientific curiosity overriding her fear. They disappeared, Ambassador Thalen said. 300 million years ago, they simply vanished. No bodies, no explanation. They left behind their cities, their technology, and their greatest secret. The hologram shifted, showing a strand of DNA that looked remarkably similar to human genetic code, but with distinct differences. differences that matched the strange sequence found in Jiwoo's blood. Before they disappeared, the progenitors seeded life across the galaxy, Ambassador Thalen continued. They visited dozens of primitive worlds and introduced their genetic material into the native life forms. Earth was one such world. Life here evolved naturally but with a touch of progenitor influence in its foundation. Kim Soo-min raised her hand like a student in class. Are you saying humans are part alien? All life on Earth carries trace amounts of progenitor genetics, Ambassador Thalen explained. But most of it has been diluted over millions of years of evolution. Except for one thing. The progenitors chose a single world to carry what we call the successor gene, a complete, undiluted genetic sequence that would mark their heir. Earth, Dr. Park said quietly. Earth, Ambassador Thalen confirmed. Buried in the DNA of creatures that would not become human for hundreds of millions of years, the progenitors left their mark. They left the right to claim their throne. Jiwoo stared at the holographic DNA strand. Her DNA strand? Why? Why would they do that? We don't know, Ambassador Thalen admitted. The progenitors left no explanation. But their automated systems are clear. Whoever carries the complete successor gene has the right to rule the progenitor empire and all its territories. But the empire is gone, Jiwoo said. You said they disappeared. The progenitors are gone, but their empire remains, Ambassador Thalen said. The hologram changed to show a vast map of the galaxy. Thousands of stars were marked in different colors. Hundreds of species evolved on worlds the progenitors once controlled. Many of us built civilizations among the ruins of their cities. We use their technology. We follow the laws and treaties they established. The empire exists, but it has no ruler. Until now. The weight of his words settled over the room like a heavy blanket. Jiwoo felt dizzy. This was too much, too big. Too impossible. I'm not a ruler, she said. I don't know anything about politics or empires or aliens. You don't have to know, Ambassador Thalen said gently. The throne will guide you. Progenitor technology responds to the successor gene. You are the key that unlocks their greatest achievements. Over the next 3 days, the world went crazy. News of Jiwoo's genetic heritage spread despite the Velran's attempts at secrecy. Someone at the lab had talked, or perhaps the government had leaked information. Either way, within 72 hours, every major news organization on Earth was talking about Han Jiwoo, the Korean researcher who was supposedly heir to an alien empire. Her apartment was surrounded by reporters. Her phone rang constantly. Government officials demanded meetings. President Choi Yoon-ji of Korea personally called, asking Jiwoo to remember her duties to her homeland. The Velran moved her to a secure location, a building they had established as their embassy in Seoul. Jiwoo found herself in a strange situation. She was under protection, but also under observation. Earth's governments wanted to control her. The Velran wanted to guide her, and she just wanted to go back to her normal life. Kim Soo-min stayed with her, refusing to leave her friend's side. Dr. Park visited daily, bringing research papers and asking endless questions about progenitor genetics. Their presence gave Jiwoo something familiar to hold on to in a world that had become utterly alien. On the 4th day, Ambassador Thalen brought troubling news. You're not the only potential heir, he said. They sat in a conference room, the walls displaying images of 3 different alien beings. 3 other species have individuals who carry fragments of the successor gene, not as complete as yours, but enough to make a claim. Fragments? Jiwoo asked. The progenitors seeded multiple worlds, Ambassador Thalen explained. Earth received the primary sequence, but pieces appeared elsewhere. These 3 individuals each carry about 30% of the successor gene. You carry 98%. So I'm the real heir, Jiwoo said. Yes, but they don't see it that way. Ambassador Thalen's expression grew dark. The Korthan Empire claims their candidate is the true successor. The Tesseran Collective believes their hive mind has the right to absorb the progenitor legacy. And there is another, a being called Kairos who has made no public statements but possesses a significant genetic marker. What do they want? Jiwoo asked, though she suspected she already knew. The same thing everyone wants. Power. The progenitor empire controls access to technology that makes current galactic civilization possible, faster than light travel, advanced medicine, energy systems. Whoever sits on the progenitor throne controls all of it. Kim Soo-min, who had been quietly listening, spoke up. So there's going to be a fight. There already is, Ambassador Thalen said. 3 systems have erupted into conflict over succession rights. The Korthan Empire is mobilizing its fleets. If this continues, we're looking at a galactic war. Jiwoo felt sick. People were dying over something in her blood, something she never asked for. There is a way to prevent war, Ambassador Thalen continued. You must travel to Axios Prime, the progenitor homeworld. There, you can undergo the trials of succession. If you pass, your claim becomes undeniable. The galaxy will have to accept you as the rightful heir. And if I refuse? Ambassador Thalen looked at her with sad eyes. Then the war continues. Billions will die, and eventually someone will come for you anyway. The other claimants won't let you live if you refuse to compete. You're a threat simply by existing. Jiwoo wanted to scream. She wanted to wake up and discover this was all a nightmare. But she looked at Kim Soo-min's worried face and knew it was real. All of it was real. That night she couldn't sleep. She stood by the window looking out at Seoul's lights. Somewhere out there, people were living normal lives. Working, eating, loving, existing without the weight of the galaxy on their shoulders. The decision came at dawn, though perhaps it had been made the moment the Velrun appeared. She couldn't hide from this. She couldn't pretend it wasn't happening. She found Ambassador Thalen in the embassy's garden tending to earth flowers with careful attention. I'll go, Jiwoo said. I'll take your trials. But I want Kim Soo-min to come with me. And I want Earth to send representatives. If I'm going to do this, humanity comes with me. Ambassador Thalen smiled. Agreed. We leave in 3 days. 2 days before their departure, everything went wrong. Jiwoo was walking through the embassy gardens when she felt something sting her neck. She reached up and pulled out a small dart. Her vision blurred immediately. Strong arms caught her before she fell. She heard shouting, the sound of weapons firing, and Kim Soo-min screaming her name. Then darkness took her. She woke up minutes later, lying on the ground with Ambassador Thalen kneeling beside her. His armor was scorched, and one of his companions lay dead nearby. Velran guards were dragging away 2 bodies. Bodies that looked humanoid but with strange ridged features. Korthan assassins, Ambassador Thalen said grimly. They tried to kill you. Jiwoo's hand shook. Someone had just tried to murder her. Actually tried to end her life. This wasn't a game or a political discussion. This was real and it was deadly. Kim Soo-min rushed over, tears streaming down her face. Are you okay? I thought you were dead. I'm alive, Jiwoo said. Though she felt anything but alive, she felt terrified. Ambassador Thalen helped her to her feet. This proves what I told you. You're not safe here. You're not safe anywhere until this is resolved. We must leave for Axios Prime immediately. Jiwoo looked at the dead Velrun guard. Someone who had died protecting her. Someone who had been alive an hour ago. The reality of her situation finally sank in completely. She couldn't run from this. She couldn't hide. The only way out was through. Then let's go, she said, her voice steady despite her fear. Let's end this. The Velrun ship was beautiful and terrifying. Jiwoo stood in its main corridor, feeling the hum of engines beneath her feet. They weren't like any engine she understood. No fuel burning, no mechanical parts grinding. Just a smooth, steady pulse that felt almost alive. Kim Soo-min pressed her face against a window, watching Earth shrink behind them. I can't believe we're in space, she whispered. Actual space. Jiwoo couldn't believe it either. 3 weeks ago, she had been worried about lab deadlines. Now she was leaving her home planet, possibly forever. The human delegation was small. Just Jiwoo, Kim Soo-min, a diplomat named Lee Hyun-woo, and a military advisor called Commander Yang Dae-ho. The Korean government had wanted to send more people, but the Velrun refused. This wasn't a diplomatic mission. It was a trial, and Jiwoo was the one being tested. Lee Hyun-woo was a tall man in his 40s with a politician's smile. He spent most of his time asking Ambassador Thalen questions about trade agreements and technology sharing. Commander Yang was quieter, a woman in her 50s with sharp eyes that missed nothing. She watched everything, memorizing the ship's layout and studying the Velrun guards. You should rest, Ambassador Thalen told Jiwoo on their second day of travel. We have 3 weeks before we reach Axios Prime. You need to prepare yourself mentally and physically. Prepare how? Jiwoo asked. I'm not a warrior. I'm not a politician. I'm a researcher who looks at cells under a microscope. That's exactly why you might succeed, Ambassador Thalen said. The progenitors didn't value strength alone. They valued wisdom, compassion, and the ability to see connections others missed. Your scientific mind is an advantage. But Jiwoo didn't feel advantaged. She felt lost. The journey through space was both boring and incredible. Boring because most of space was empty darkness. Incredible because occasionally they passed things that took her breath away. A nebula that glowed like paint spilled across the stars. A binary star system locked in an eternal dance. Stations the size of cities built by species she had never imagined. At one station, they stopped to refuel. Jiwoo saw aliens for the first time beyond the Velrun. So many different forms, some humanoid, some insect-like, some that defied easy description. They all stopped and stared as she passed. Word had spread. The human heir was traveling to Axios Prime. Some looked at her with hope. Others with suspicion or anger. One alien, something that looked like a walking tree, actually bowed. Jiwoo didn't know how to respond, so she just nodded awkwardly. They worship the progenitors, Kim Soo-min explained later. She had been reading Velran historical files. Some species believe the progenitors were gods. They think you're divine. I'm not divine, Jiwoo said. I'm just a person with weird DNA. Try telling them that, Kim Soo-min said, gesturing to the window. Outside, a crowd had gathered at the station, hoping to catch a glimpse of the heir. As they traveled deeper into Velran space, Ambassador Thalen began teaching Jiwoo about the galaxy she was supposed to inherit. The progenitor empire had been vast, but now it was fragmented. Hundreds of independent governments controlled different sectors. They all followed the old progenitor laws, but barely. Wars were common. Territory disputes constant. The empire needed a ruler to bring order. But Jiwoo kept asking a different question. What if I don't want to rule? Ambassador Thalen never gave her a straight answer. Commander Yang insisted on physical training. Every morning, Jiwoo ran through the ship's corridors, did exercises, and practiced basic self-defense. She hated every minute of it, but the commander was relentless. You're going into danger, Commander Yang said. You need to be able to protect yourself. Lee Hyunwoo focused on teaching her diplomacy, how to speak without saying too much, how to read body language, how to negotiate. Jiwoo found these lessons frustrating. She preferred direct communication, not political games. But the strangest part of the journey was the visions. They started small. Jiwoo would close her eyes and see flashes of places she had never been, cities of crystal, gardens floating in space, faces that weren't human or Velrun but something else entirely, something ancient. The visions grew stronger each day. Sometimes she would be walking down a corridor and suddenly feel like she had been there before. The ship's layout would seem familiar, even though she had never seen it until 2 weeks ago. It's the Successor gene, Ambassador Thalen explained when she told him. It carries more than just genetic information. It carries memories, fragments of progenitor consciousness. The closer you get to Axios Prime, the stronger the connection becomes. So I'm remembering someone else's life? Jiwoo asked. In a way, yes. The last progenitor ruler left impressions in the genetic code, instincts, knowledge. Think of it as inherited memory. The idea terrified and fascinated Jiwoo in equal measure. She was carrying someone else's thoughts inside her DNA, someone who had died millions of years ago. 3 days from Axios Prime, they received a transmission. The other claimants were also traveling to the homeworld. The trials would begin simultaneously for all candidates. Ambassador Thalen showed her images of her competitors. Forish of the Korthan Empire was a massive warrior, covered in armor and battle scars. The Tesseran collective appeared as a swarm of small creatures that moved as one. And Kiris remained a mystery, just a shadowy figure in long robes. Don't underestimate any of them, Ambassador Thalen warned. They've all prepared for years for this moment. I've prepared for 3 weeks, Jiwoo said. Sometimes that's enough. On their last night before reaching Axios Prime, Lee Hyunwoo invited Jiwoo to dinner in the ship's dining area. Commander Yang and Kim Soo-min joined them. It felt almost normal, eating together and talking about Earth, about homes they might never see again. What will you do if you win? Lee Hyunwoo asked Jiwoo. I don't know, she admitted. I haven't thought that far ahead. You should, Lee Hyunwoo said. His voice had an edge to it. Humanity needs strong leadership in the galaxy. We need someone who will put Earth first. I thought I was supposed to put the Empire first, Jiwoo said. The Empire should serve humanity, Lee Hyunwoo replied. We're the heirs. The progenitors chose Earth, that means something. Commander Yang frowned. That's not what the trials are about, isn't it? Li Hyunwoo's smile didn't reach his eyes. We finally have a chance to matter in the galaxy. We should use it. The conversation made Jiwoo uncomfortable. She excused herself early and returned to her quarters. Kim Soo-min followed her. He's wrong, Kim Soo-min said. This isn't about making humanity powerful. It's about bringing peace to the galaxy. Is it? Jiwoo asked. Everyone keeps telling me what this is about. The Velran want stability. Earth wants power. The Korthan want conquest. But what do the progenitors want? They're the ones who set this up. Kim Soo-min had no answer. The next day they arrived at Axios Prime. Jiwoo had seen pictures, but nothing prepared her for the reality. The planet was a monument. Every surface was covered in progenitor architecture. Towers that reached into the clouds, cities that floated on massive platforms, crystalline structures that caught sunlight and turned it into rainbows. And at the center of the largest continent, visible even from orbit, was the palace. A structure so massive it looked like a mountain, but too perfect to be natural. The eternal throne waited there silent for 300 million years. Hundreds of ships orbited the planet. Representatives from across the galaxy had come to witness the trials. This wasn't just important to the progenitor empire. This would reshape galactic politics for generations. The ship began its descent. Jiwoo's hands gripped the armrests of her seat. Her heart pounded. The visions came faster now, overwhelming her with images of this planet as it once was. Alive, bustling, the capital of an empire that spanned the stars. Are you okay? Kim Soo-min asked. No, Jiwoo admitted. I'm terrified. Good, Commander Yang said from across the cabin. Fear will keep you alert. They landed in a vast spaceport outside the palace. The moment Jiwoo stepped off the ship, she felt it. A pull. Something deep inside her recognized this place. The Successor gene resonated with the planet itself. Ambassador Thalen led them through crowds of aliens. Some cheered. Others protested. Security was everywhere, keeping the various factions separated. The tension was thick enough to cut. They were taken to quarters in a building near the palace. Luxurious rooms with technology that responded to Jiwoo's presence. Doors opened before she touched them. Lights adjusted to her preferences automatically. The building knew she carried progenitor genetics. That night, Jiwoo stood on a balcony looking at the palace in the distance. Tomorrow the trials would begin. Tomorrow she would compete against warriors and collectives and mysteries for the right to rule an empire she never wanted. Kim Soo-min joined her. They stood in silence, watching the twin moons rise over the ancient city. Whatever happens, Kim Soo-min said, I'm proud of you. Jiwoo smiled, though her eyes were wet. I haven't done anything yet. You left Earth. You faced assassins. You traveled across the galaxy. That's more than most people ever do. Jiwoo squeezed her friend's hand. Thank you for coming with me. Where else would I be? In the distance, the palace glowed with internal light. Waiting. Patient. It had waited for 300 million years. It could wait one more night, but Jiwoo couldn't sleep. The visions were too strong now. She saw the palace as it once was, filled with progenitors. The palace was even more magnificent up close. Jiwoo walked through corridors that seemed to go on forever, each wall covered in designs that hurt to look at directly. They moved and shifted, containing information she couldn't quite read but somehow understood. The Successor gene was activating, responding to its home. Ambassador Thalen led the human delegation to a massive chamber where representatives from hundreds of species had gathered. The room could have held thousands, but it felt intimate somehow. The architecture played tricks with space and perspective. At the center of the room stood three other figures. The rival claimant, Voresh of the Korthan Empire, was terrifying. Nearly 3 meters tall, covered in dark armor that looked grown rather than built. His face was mostly hidden behind a helmet, but his eyes glowed red. He radiated violence and purpose. When he looked at Jiwoo, she felt like prey being evaluated by a predator. The Tesseran collective was unsettling in a different way. Thousands of small creatures, each the size of a rat, moving in perfect synchronization. They flowed like liquid, forming vaguely humanoid shapes before dissolving and reforming. The air around them hummed with their collective consciousness. Kairos stood apart from the others. Robed and hooded, face hidden in shadow. Jiwoo couldn't tell what species Kairos belonged to. Something about the figure felt old and sad. When Kairos looked in her direction, Jiwoo felt a sudden warmth, almost like recognition. A Velran archivist stepped forward, ancient and distinguished. Her voice carried throughout the chamber without amplification. "Welcome, claimants. Welcome, witnesses. We gather to observe the trials of succession, established by the progenitors before their departure. 3 trials will test the worthiness of those who seek the eternal throne." She gestured, and holographic displays appeared, showing 3 symbols. The trial of knowledge, the trial of strength, the trial of unity. Pass all 3 and your claim becomes law. Fail, and you forfeit all rights to the progenitor legacy. Voresh's voice boomed across the chamber. "When do we begin?" "At dawn," the archivist replied. "Prepare yourselves. The trials show no mercy." That night Jiwoo couldn't eat. Kim Soo-min tried to comfort her, but words felt hollow. Commander Yang made her practice basic combat moves one more time. Lee Hyunwoo kept talking about strategy and politics until Jiwoo asked him to leave. She stood alone on the balcony watching the palace. Somewhere in there, the eternal throne waited. She wondered what kind of person the progenitors thought would sit on it, what qualities they valued, what they hoped their successor would become. The visions came again, stronger than ever. She saw the last progenitor ruler standing in this very palace, felt the weight of responsibility, the loneliness of command, the terrible choice that led to their species' disappearance. Dawn came too quickly. The first trial took place in what the Velran called the Archive of All Things. It was a library, but also something more. A repository of every piece of knowledge the progenitors had accumulated. Millions of years of history, science, and philosophy stored in crystalline data structures. The 4 claimants entered together, but were immediately separated. Each appeared in their own chamber, facing a holographic interface that blazed with questions. "The trial of knowledge," a voice said, seeming to come from everywhere. "Prove your wisdom. Solve the riddle of the progenitors." Jiwoo's chamber filled with scenarios. Not simple questions, but complex moral and philosophical problems. A ship is sinking with 100 passengers, but the rescue shuttle can only save 50. How do you choose? A species faces extinction, but saving them requires resources that would doom 2 other civilizations. What is the right choice? She answered as honestly as she could, using her scientific training to break down problems into components. But many questions had no right answer, only difficult choices. The trial wasn't testing her knowledge of facts. It was testing her judgment, her values, her character. Hours passed. The questions grew harder. Finally, the trial presented its ultimate challenge. A holographic simulation appeared, a galaxy in chaos, wars spreading across hundreds of systems, billions suffering, and a button. Press it and one world dies instantly, but the wars end. Everyone else lives in peace. Refuse and the chaos continues. More people will die eventually, but you don't pull the trigger directly. Jiwoo stared at the simulation. Her hands shook. This was the kind of question philosophers argued about for centuries. There was no correct answer, only the answer she could live with. She reached out, but instead of pressing the button or refusing, she touched the simulation itself. "Show me alternatives," she said. "There has to be another way." The simulation paused. Then it began showing her possibilities she hadn't considered. Diplomatic solutions, resource sharing, ways to address the root causes of war, rather than just ending the symptom. They were harder. They took longer. Some might fail, but they didn't require her to murder an entire world. The chamber went dark. Then light returned, gentle and warm. "Trial complete," the voice said. "You pass." Jiwoo collapsed to her knees, crying with relief. When she emerged from the chamber, she found the Tesseran collective hadn't made it. They had become trapped in logical loops, unable to choose between equivalent options. Their perfect rationality had become a weakness. Voresh had passed, though he looked angry about it. Kairos had also succeeded and nodded respectfully to Jiwoo. 2 claimants remained. 2 trials left. The second trial began the next day in the Gauntlet, a vast wilderness preserve that the progenitors had maintained. It contained creatures and challenges from 100 worlds. The trial was simple in concept. Reach the center and claim a marker, but the journey would test every survival skill they possessed. Jiwoo was allowed to bring 2 companions. She chose Kim Soo-min and Commander Yang. Lee Hyunwoo protested, but the rules were clear. They entered the Gauntlet at dawn. Within an hour, they encountered their first challenge. Robotic defense systems, ancient but still functional. Commander Yang took the lead, using her military training to guide them through the danger. They moved carefully, avoiding detection where possible, fighting only when necessary. Varesh charged through the gauntlet like a force of nature. His strength was overwhelming, but Jiwoo noticed he wasted energy, fighting every challenge head-on. Kairos moved like a shadow, avoiding most dangers entirely. 2 days into the trial, they found Kairos trapped. A collapsed structure had pinned the mysterious figure. Jiwoo wanted to keep moving. This was a competition after all. But something in her refused to leave someone suffering. "We have to help," she said. Commander Yang disagreed. "This isn't a rescue mission. We're racing for the throne." "I don't care," Jiwoo said. "We're helping." They worked for hours, using tools and teamwork to free Kairos. When the robed figure finally emerged, the hood fell back. Jiwoo gasped. Kairos wasn't like any species she had seen. The face was almost human, but not quite. The eyes were too large, too knowing. The skin had a faint luminescence. "Thank you," Kairos said. The voice was gentle. "You didn't have to do that." "Yes, I did," Jiwoo said. Kairos studied her for a long moment. "You're going to win, you know. Not because you're the strongest, but because you still have compassion. That's what they wanted." Before Jiwoo could ask what that meant, Kairos disappeared into the wilderness. They reached the center 3 hours after Varesh. The Korthan warrior stood there holding his marker and glaring at them. "You're too slow, human. This trial is mine." But when the archivists arrived to judge the trial, they announced both claimants had passed. "The trial measures more than speed," they explained. "It measures character under pressure. Both have proven worthy. The final trial would decide everything." That night, Ambassador Thalen came to Jiwoo's quarters. His expression was grave. "I need to warn you about something. There are factions who don't want any heir to succeed. They've grown comfortable with the current chaos. A true ruler would disrupt their power." "What are you saying?" Jiwoo asked. "Be careful tomorrow. The trial will be dangerous enough without adding assassination to the mix." He left before she could ask more questions. Jiwoo couldn't sleep. She paced her room, thinking about everything that had happened. The trials, the visions, the weight of expectations from species she had never met. She felt like she was drowning in responsibility. Kim Suman found her on the balcony at midnight. "Can't sleep either?" They sat together watching the palace. Tomorrow would be the final trial. Tomorrow everything would change. "What if I fail?" Jiwoo whispered. "Then you fail," Kim Suman said. "But you tried. That's more than most people ever do." An explosion shook the building. Commander Yang burst into the room, weapon drawn. "We're under attack. Assassins, they're coming for you." The lights went out. In the darkness, Jiwoo heard weapons fire and screaming. She stumbled back from the balcony as something flew past her head, an energy bolt that scorched the wall where she had been standing. "Run!" Commander Yang shouted. They fled through the building, pursued by figures in black armor. Whoever they were professionals. They moved in coordinated teams, cutting off escape routes. Jiwoo's heart hammered. She wasn't a fighter. She was a researcher. She didn't know how to survive this. Then Ambassador Thalen appeared, his armor glowing with power. He fought the assassins with grace and fury, buying time for the humans to escape. "Get to the palace," he shouted. The trial of unity took place in the throne room itself. Jiwoo and Varesh stood before the massive seat that had been empty for 300 million years. The eternal throne gleamed with inner light, waiting. Kairos was gone. The mysterious figure had withdrawn from the trials without explanation. Only 2 claimants remained. The archivist explained the final test. "You will each enter a simulation of the galaxy. You will face the challenges of rulership, crisis, conflict, impossible choices. How you respond will determine the worthy heir." Jiwoo and Varesh were separated into different chambers. The moment Jiwoo stepped inside, the world dissolved around her. She found herself standing in a command center overlooking a holographic galaxy. Billions of stars, trillions of lives, all waiting for her decisions. The first crisis appeared immediately. A plague was spreading through 3 systems. She had resources to save 1, maybe 2 systems if she stretched everything thin, but not all 3. Jiwoo's scientific training took over. She analyzed the plague, looking for patterns. Then she did something the simulation didn't expect. She shared the medical data openly with all 3 systems. She told them to work together, pooling their own resources with what she could provide. It was risky. Some might still die, but it gave all three a fighting chance. The simulation accepted her choice. The crisis resolved, not perfectly but better than if she had played favorites. More challenges came. Economic collapses, border disputes, species demanding independence. Each one tested her judgment, her compassion, her ability to see beyond simple solutions. She made mistakes. A trade agreement that seemed fair turned out to favor one species over another. A military intervention that was supposed to stop a war just created new enemies. She wasn't perfect, but she learned from each error, adapting her approach. The simulation showed her something important. Perfect rule was impossible. There would always be conflicts, always be someone unhappy. The goal wasn't to make everyone happy. It was to create systems where people could solve their own problems fairly. Hours passed, days maybe, though time felt strange in the simulation. Jiwoo grew exhausted, but she kept going. She established councils where different species could voice concerns. She created laws that protected the weak without crushing the strong. She shared technology but required responsibility. Her simulated empire was messy. Arguments happened constantly. Some systems rejected her authority, but slowly cooperation emerged. Species that had been enemies for centuries found common ground, not because she forced them, but because she created space for them to choose peace. Finally, the simulation ended. Jiwoo stumbled out of the chamber drained. She had no idea if she had passed or failed. She had done her best, but was it enough? Ambassador Thalen waited outside, his wounded arm now bandaged. "How do you feel?" "Like I lived 100 years in a day," Jiwoo admitted. Voresh emerged from his chamber moments later. The Korthan warrior looked satisfied, confident. He nodded once to Jiwoo, a gesture of respect between competitors. They were led to the throne room. Every important figure in the galaxy seemed to be there. Thousands of beings from hundreds of species. The room should have been crowded, but progenitor architecture made it feel spacious. The archivist stood before the eternal throne. Both claimants completed the trials, but only one proved worthy. The throne has chosen. The massive seat began to glow. Light spread across the room, washing over everyone. Then a beam of pure radiance shot from the throne straight to Jiwoo. She gasped as it touched her. The successor gene in her DNA resonated with the ancient technology. Recognition, acceptance. "Welcome home, Han Jiwoo of Earth," the archivist announced. "You are the rightful heir to the progenitor empire." The room erupted. Some species cheered. Others looked angry or confused. Voresh stood silent, then slowly knelt. "I acknowledge the throne's choice," he said. His voice carried disappointment, but also honor. He had lost, but he would accept it. Jiwoo walked toward the throne. Each step felt heavy. Everyone was watching. Everyone had expectations. The weight of an entire galaxy pressed down on her shoulders. She reached the throne and placed her hand on it. Images flooded her mind. The complete history of the progenitors, their rise, their achievements, their art and science and philosophy, and finally their last act. She saw the final progenitor ruler standing exactly where she stood now. Saw the choice they made. They chose to leave. To give their children's species a chance to grow without a parent's shadow. They ascended to something beyond physical existence, leaving only this test behind. And with the memories came a message. A final hologram appeared, visible to everyone in the chamber. The last progenitor ruler spoke in a language that everyone somehow understood. "If you hear this, you have passed our trials. You carry our legacy in your blood. You have the right to rule an empire, but before you sit on this throne, you must make one final choice. You can claim this power, command these worlds, and shape the galaxy according to your vision, or you can do what we could not. You can let go. You can dissolve this empire, return power to its people, and trust them to find their own way. What is worthier, a benevolent ruler or the right to self-determination?" The room fell silent. Everyone stared at Jiwoo. What would she choose? Jiwoo looked at the throne. She felt its power calling to her. She could sit there. She could rule. She could make the galaxy better, protect the weak, punish the wicked. She had good intentions, but she remembered the simulation. How messy democracy was, how much people argued and made mistakes, but also how they learned, how they grew, how they took ownership of their choices. She thought about Earth, about Korea, about all the times in human history when one person held too much power. Sometimes they used it well, More often, they didn't. And even the good rulers eventually died, leaving systems that depended on them. She thought about Commander Yang, wounded, protecting her. About Ambassador Thalen, who had guided her with patience. About Kim Suman, who had never left her side. About all the people who had their own dreams and goals beyond serving an empire. The choice crystallized in her mind. She turned away from the throne. "I claim this throne," she said, her voice carrying through the chamber. "By right of succession, by right of blood, I am the heir to the progenitor empire. This authority is mine." Species began to cheer. Then Jiwoo raised her hand for silence. "And with this authority I dissolve the empire." Shock rippled through the chamber. Voices raised in protest and confusion. "The progenitors left you a gift," Jiwoo continued. "Their technology, their knowledge, their example. But they also left you a choice. They could have stayed and ruled forever. They chose to leave. They trusted you to grow up without them." She walked to the center of the room, addressing everyone. "I'm not a god. I'm not even a particularly good leader. I'm a scientist who likes looking at cells under a microscope. The only reason I'm here is because I have the right DNA. That's not a good reason to rule billions of people." "You passed the trials," someone shouted. "The throne chose you." "The trials tested if I was worthy to make this choice," Jiwoo said. "And I choose freedom. For all of you. I dissolve the legal structures that bind you to this empire. I establish a council where every species has an equal voice. I share all progenitor technology freely, holding nothing back. And I abdicate any claim to rule over you." Paresh stood up. "You're a fool. The galaxy needs strong leadership. Without it, there will be chaos." "Maybe," Jiwoo agreed. "But it will be your chaos to solve. Your choices to make. Your future to build. I won't take that from you." "What about the technology?" the Velran archivist asked. "What about the weapons? If you give everything away freely, some will use it for evil." "Yes," Jiwoo said. "Some will, but most won't. And those who do, the rest of you will have the power to stop them. Together. That's what unity really means. Not one person forcing everyone to cooperate, but people choosing to work together because it's right." She returned to the throne and placed both hands on it. "By right of succession, I claim the progenitor legacy, and I gift it to you, all of you. You are the true successors. Every species that evolved on worlds the progenitors touched. You inherited their galaxy. Now inherit their responsibility to care for it." The throne pulsed with light. Then slowly, deliberately, it began to dissolve. The ancient technology was redistributing itself, uploading to systems across the galaxy. Medical knowledge, engineering advances, scientific discoveries. Everything the progenitors had learned now freely available. The room erupted in chaos. Some species celebrated, others protested furiously. Arguments broke out. It was messy and loud and completely imperfect. Jiwoo smiled. This was right. Ambassador Thalen approached her. "You just gave up an empire. Do you understand what you've done?" "I freed a galaxy," Jiwoo said. "Or at least gave it the chance to free itself. Some will never forgive you for this choice. I know. But I can live with that." "Could I live with ruling people who never chose me?" "No, I couldn't." Kyrus appeared from somewhere in the crowd. The mysterious figure's hood was down, revealing that ancient, knowing face. "You understand now," Kyrus said. "You're one of them, aren't you?" Jiwoo asked. "A real progenitor. I stayed behind to ensure the succession happened correctly," Kyrus admitted. "My people hoped someone would choose what you chose. Freedom over power.